Deleted episode of Peppa Pig. It was not worth going there. A cheerful atmosphere filled the house. Peppa, George, and Susie were gathering to watch a new cartoon. Mommy Pig was preparing treats, and Daddy Pig was telling funny stories. Suddenly, a strange creak sounded inside the house. Peppa and Susie exchanged glances, smiles fading from their faces.
What was that?
Asked Susie.
Probably just the wind.
Replied Peppa, but her eyes looked worried. The children decided to explore the house. In the bathroom, they noticed an old pipe pulsing slightly, emitting an ominous sound. Cracks were visible on its surface. Peppa, unable to resist curiosity, stepped closer. Suddenly, the pipes began to shake and whispering voices called out from within.
"Come down to us,"
they seemed to say from deep inside, and Peppa felt a shiver run down her spine. At that moment, Mommy Pig returned and sharply said,
Children, don't go too close to the pipes.
Her voice sounded frightened.
These pipes could be dangerous.
But her warning only heightened their fear and their excitement. Unexpectedly, the pipes started stretching out like living creatures and grabbed George.
Help!
Shouted Peppa. Susie rushed to help, but was also caught.
"You won't escape."
A sinister whisper echoed, and Peppa realized they were trapped.
What to do? We can't leave!
Cried Susie. Peppa watched as the pipes pulled George into darkness. Peppa! Susie! He called out as his voice faded away behind the wall. Peppa and Susie were terrified.
Don't let go of each other!
Shouted Peppa, but it was too late. They felt cold tentacles of the pipes wrap around them, and soon they too were pressed against the wall, unable to move. At that moment, Mommy and Daddy ran into the bathroom, but upon seeing what was happening, they froze in horror.
Peppa, George, run!
Shouted Mommy Pig, but now the pipes began stretching toward them as well. The parents tried to run, but it was too late. The pipes seized them and they disappeared into darkness. When everything fell silent, only empty walls remained in the bathroom. Peppa and Susie, pressed against the wall, watched as the pipes became still again. Fear and despair flickered in their eyes. They understood that they had lost not only George, but also Peppa's parents. A normal day, Peppa and George are playing with dolls. One of them was strange. Its head was slightly tilted to the side. Peppa carefully turned the broken doll. A thin crack appeared on the face of the porcelain doll. Sometimes a small crack is just a premonition of something terrible. The light in the room flickered for a second. At that moment, Evie in the crib flinched and fell silent. She was no longer breathing evenly. Black liquid was dripping from the crack in the doll. Peppa ran to the crib, but it was empty. The outlines of tiny fingers had disappeared, replaced by cold fingerprints. A trail of black liquid stretched from the crib to the dollhouse. Horrified, Peppa took George's hand and led him there. In the central room sat the puppeteer, a figure with a porcelain face, but with cracks running all over its body. In its hands was Evie, like a doll, her eyes closed, unmoving. The puppeteer lifted its head and slowly opened its eyes. They glowed red. It stroked Evie's cheek and said,
"My new doll."
Peppa and George froze as if held by an invisible force. The dollhouse continues to play, even if the players are silent. Doll Evie spoke in a creepy voice.
You are next.
Deleted Peppa Pig episode. The Mystery of the Chest. On a bright, sunny day, the entire Peppa family was on their way to visit Grandma and Grandpa.
I can't wait to see Grandma and Grandpa.
Said Peppa.
Dinosaur. Grrr.
Exclaimed George. They enjoyed a cozy time together, baking cookies. Peppa and George exchanged mischievous smiles.
Let's explore the basement.
suggested Peppa. They tiptoed down the creaky stairs into the dimly lit basement. In the corner stood a dusty chest covered in cobwebs.
What is that? A treasure chest?
Peppa asked in surprise. She opened it with a loud creak. Suddenly, dark shadows burst out from inside, forming sinister figures. "Peppa, I'm scared," George said fearfully. The children's screams caused their parents to rush downstairs quickly.
What's going on, kids?
Asked Mummy Pig. The shadows swirled around the parents, trying to pull them into the chest. Daddy Pig grabbed one of the tentacles that was emerging from the chest.
George, Peppa, back away!
Daddy Pig shouted sternly. But suddenly, one of the shadows struck him, causing him to lose his balance and loosen his grip. The shadows swallowed the parents. Grandpa Pig hurried down the stairs with a serious look on his face.
Inside this chest were the souls of those brave enough to open it. I found this on an old ship,
He said grimly.
It's a curse.
He pulled out an old book from his pocket and began to recite a spell. The shadows taunted Grandpa, whispering incomprehensible words, and he looked frightened.
Grandpa, help us!
Peppa cried out. The shadows started to dissolve, but suddenly George snatched the book from Grandpa's hands and threw it onto the floor. His eyes turned red as if he were under hypnosis. "No more light needed," he declared. The remaining shadows lunged at Grandpa, dragging him into the chest. He struggled but was helpless. Peppa watched in horror as George advanced toward her with tears in her eyes.
What are you doing?
She shouted in fear. With tears streaming down her face, she grabbed the tattered book tightly and held it high.
I won't let you take my family!
She declared to the shadows, her voice trembling but resolute. She recited something she remembered from Grandpa's stories. The shadows screamed and began to vanish. Silence fell over the basement. Peppa and George were left alone, trembling with horror as they realized they had lost their family. Grandma Pig appeared at the top of the stairs, looking horrified at what was happening. Peppa and George looked at each other, trembling, speechless. From inside the open chest, faint whispers of the shadows still echoed softly. In the evening, Peppa went home, but the road veered off to the side. She saw familiar faces, Susie, Rebecca, Denny, and new ones, pale and motionless. In the center of the circle, a puddle of black liquid reflecting the sky, but distorted. They stood silently, waiting. Peppa slowly approached. Susie turned her head abruptly without blinking, her eyes empty sockets, a black drop at the corner of her mouth. All the children simultaneously turned their heads toward Peppa, synchronously, faces devoid of emotion. The puddle in the center of the circle pulsed, gentle ripples emanating from it. Peppa stepped back. The children reached their hands out at the same time, their fingers elongated, black liquid flowing from them. The children's mouths opened to an unnatural width, but silently. The puddle in the center suddenly stretched upward, forming a black tentacle reaching toward Peppa. Peppa ran. When she looked back, everything had disappeared. But it was worse. Numerous trails of black slime led in different directions. Some led to Peppa's gate. Someone left with her, or followed her. Midnight, Peppa sat on her bed, drawing a circle in her notebook. A shadow near the door began to change. It was the silhouette of one of the children from the circle. Beyond the door, the park. That very park. Children in a circle. She was among them, standing hand in hand with the others. If Peppa isn't with them, then who is in the circle? Her eyes became as empty as Susie's. She slowly smiled. Suddenly, a face, blurred, eye sockets empty, mouth twisted into a grin, black liquid dripping, darkness flooding everything. You are already standing in the circle. You just don't know it yet. Peppa, George, and little Evie snuggled comfortably in bed. A bedtime story, the perfect end to the day. Peppa's gaze drifted toward the bedroom door behind which something was awakening,
I'll check the kitchen. Quickly, go to sleep.
said Mommy Pig, but she never returned.
Mom!
George and Evie looked anxiously into the semi-darkness of the corridor. The call of darkness came from there. Peppa took Evie's hand and they stepped forward into the unknown. Dark streams flowed down the walls. Each step could be their last.
Mom, where are you?
And the darkness answered. Suddenly, a splash. Ink began to rise upward. From the droplets, a silhouette appeared, almost reaching the ceiling. A thin body, tentacle-like arms covered with cracks. 2 blazing red orbs for eyes. A mouth twisted into a crooked, predatory grin. Black liquid dripping from its fangs. It knows where you are and is waiting for its moment. The monster's tentacles suddenly swept at George and Evie. Peppa screamed in horror, reaching out for them, but her hands passed through the black mass. It doesn't eat, it transforms. George and Evie disappeared into the ink-like mass, and after a second, they reappeared, but already changed. Their eyes were completely black, their smiles unnaturally wide, their skin gray. Now they are his servants.
Play with us, Peppa.
Suddenly, from the depths of the corridor, Mommy and Daddy emerged, distorted, their faces smeared, eyes black, with traces of black liquid in the corners of their mouths. Even loved ones have become strangers, and now she is alone. Deleted Peppa Pig episode. The ominous shadow. It was an ordinary day. Fun and laughter playing with George, giggles and mischief. But suddenly, Peppa noticed something strange. Her shadow on the wall was moving out of sync with her. The shadow was distorted.
George, do you see this?
It's just the light, Peppa, he replied, not paying attention. But Peppa couldn't shake her unease. During the night, she heard footsteps. The shadow was alive again, moving on its own. Suddenly, it grabbed Peppa's hand and led her in an unknown direction. They found themselves in a dark forest. Gloom blocked out every ray of sunlight. Peppa's heart clenched. She saw a whole kingdom of shadows before her. They whispered, "You can't escape." Peppa felt doomed. Just as the shadows began to surround her, she heard George's voice. "Peppa, hold on!" George took out a mirror that his mom had once given him, with the words,
One day, it will save your life.
The shadows froze, and their reflections started to be drawn into the mirror, pulling them into the looking glass realm. They screamed and struggled as they vanished without a trace into the mirror abyss.
We're saved!
Peppa exclaimed, hugging George with relief. The world returned to normal again, but somewhere in the darkness, deep within the forest, a mysterious whisper could be heard.